Hello and welcome to Think Watercolour. I'm Paul Webber and I'll be painting from this reference photograph today. I took this photograph quite a few years back in Altea on the Costa Blanca in Spain. It's a small town and the old town is quite picturesque, and what attracted me about this image is the way the bougainvillea creates this diagonal across the composition, and you have the steps down leading into the background. At the bottom of the hill, you can barely see it, but there's an elderly lady struggling up the hill with a shopping bag. And I'm going to move her further up the hill under, just coming out of the bougainvillea shadow, just to add a focal point on the left of the composition. So let's get started. I'm going to start by wetting all of the paper. This is a block of Bockinford 300 gram rough white paper. I've sped this video up about 2 times because it's quite a long video and I didn't want to bore the pants off everybody. So I'll talk over what I'm doing as I go. This is cerulean blue and a touch of cobalt blue for the sky. I want it darker at the top. I'll add some more pigment in a second. The mix below that is the same mix but with some burnt sienna added for just some of the lighter the areas on the buildings that are not quite pure white because of the way the light falls. So this is a little bit of extra pigment going into the sky. And as I come down, just darkening some of the walls on the left hand side because there is a little bit of shadow but not much. It's a very bright day and the sun is, or the sun was, pretty much overhead, so the shadows are only slightly offset. So you'll see as I progress where the shadows fall, but I wanted to try and retain the whiteness, especially this building on the right. The sun is hitting that and it's glaring back at you. I want to show the heat of the day, if you like. It's typical Costa Blanca weather. Clear blue skies, not a cloud to be seen, and very strong shadows. In the reference photographs, I thought the shadows were a little bit on the weak side, so I'm going to strengthen those a little bit. So I'm just blocking stuff in for the time being and making sure that I've got everything that I want covered. Okay, I've let that dry, and now I'm just indicating where the windows and doorways are on the left hand side. This is the first wash. I will go a bit darker at the top. The shadow's stronger at the top and fades a little bit, but just blocking them in for the time being. Because I've drawn this fairly lightly, I guess it's pretty hard to see what I'm actually painting, but there's this is a roller shutter which will eventually be green. This is just the initial shadow underneath it, and quite dark at the top. This is just some Windsor yellow and Windsor orange, just for mixed together for the tiles that are sticking out. They're barely noticeable, and the same with these tiles on the right. They'll probably disappear once I start painting the foliage in, but they're there, so I'm putting them in. Just feathering the edges a little bit. This is a Cotton flat brush that I'm using for these doorways. Oh, this brush is just about to put the lightest lights on the bougainvillea. This is a brush by Jackson's. It's a liner brush, and it holds a fair bit of water, but it's also very good for painting loose foliage and flowers. So this is just the lightest light I'm putting in now, and there will be a lot more darker areas, but as I always say, I work from the lightest lights towards the darkest darks in my paintings, so that you get this steady build up to the darks, and once you put the really darks in, it brings the painting alive. That's the theory anyway. Just added a touch of green. It's a touch of jadeite green to the mix, and getting some of the darker greens in here. I'm doing this wet in wet. I like the greens to bleed, the lightest greens to bleed together a little bit. You can see why I've sped this demonstration up. It's quite a lengthy process putting these different greens in for the foliage, so it's better to show it to you fairly quickly. Just darkening the shadow at the tops of these window openings. Don't need to be too careful with this. It's at the end of the day, it's a loose sketch of a painting, really, just for demonstration purposes, just to show what you can achieve with a relatively small palette of colours. The doorway closest to us, which I haven't painted yet, is actually bright blue, a really strong blue, so I'm saving that to do a little bit later. This is the shadow from the bougainvillea above. I'm just putting it in. I'll probably make this a bit darker later, because I think it might be a bit too light once it dries. I really want the shadows to be very, very strong to emphasize the whiteness of the buildings and the strength of the sun. And as I go up towards the bougainvillea, I'm going to add more green to the shadow, so I'll just feather that in for the time being, because that's really just a solid mass of green leaves in deep shadow. This is just a shadow for the old lady who's struggling up the hill with the bag. Just pop a shadow in for her hat. This window that I've just painted is it has a security grille over it, quite common in this part of Spain, where windows are near the ground. Most of the houses have these security grilles, the decorative ironwork, and I'll be putting that in at the end of the painting. Just mixing up some dark blue here, ready to paint this door on the left. I just spotted something I want to do first, which is just to drop in the shadow in the dark green of the roller shutter. This is the bougainvillea flowers. I'm using permanent rose to start with, fairly light mix as the lightest shade of the flowers. I've added more flowers than there were in the reference photograph. I thought it needed a little bit more colour in the middle and towards the left, just to draw the eye across the painting really. This is alizarin crimson, just to darken some of the flowers. It's quite a big mass of darker flowers at the top. It's fairly neat colour, so it's not too watered down. As with anything like this, it's knowing when to stop with darkening the colours, so I hope I get it right, but we shall see. Okay, I'm now putting in this doorway, which is quite a strong blue. This is ultramarine and a touch of Payne's grey. Use a little bit of dry brush work at the bottom there. And I've gone too far with the framework of the window, so I'm just going to use a damp brush to feather that away. It adds to the shadow of the wall, so it's fine. At the end of the day, it's just a quick sketch, so it's it's not the end of the world if I get anything wrong. I'm just trying to demonstrate how you can do things. This is pretty strong mix of jadeite green, with a touch of ultramarine just to darken it. These are the really dark areas of shadow. The shadows are very strong on this day because the sunlight is almost directly above. It's slightly offset, so the shadows are pushed back a little bit, but it's these dark shadows that will define the depth of the foliage. As I say, this Jackson's liner brush is an ideal brush for this sort of thing. It just has a lovely flexible tip to it that you can use it for drawing really fine lines, but it's also very good for painting foliage. It holds a fair bit of water in the body of the brush too, so you can load it with a fair amount of paint. I'm just adding some more of the dark to the green at the top here. It's really contrasty. And underneath here it's almost black because of the shadow. It's so dark. But I'm trying to keep that green tint going into the shadows it comes down. As I said before, the reason I want the shadows to be really strong is it emphasizes the whiteness of the building and what a bright day it is. Just darkening some of the flowers at the top. Just to create a bit more volume. And once they blend into these dark green shadows that are still damp, you can see it starts to come together as a solid mass of plant life. As I always say, it's at the end of the day, it's just a piece of paper and some coloured water, so don't be hard on yourself if things go wrong. Try and correct them. If not, start again. And learn from any mistakes that you've made. I don't think I know any artist who's totally happy with any painting that he or she finishes. You walk away from it for maybe a half a day or a day, come back to it and you spot things that you should have done or wish you'd done. Other people won't even notice, but because you have painted it, you're the artist, you know where you think you went wrong. But don't beat yourself up over things like that. It's a natural instinct to want to improve all the time. Just put the shadow in under that where the tiles stick out above the roof. Just putting in the lightest green of the roller shutter. And adding this is jadeite green again. I'm just adding some of the darker area and I'll feather that in in a second with some clear water. Just that's where the sunlight's hitting it. Vary the shades a little bit, otherwise it becomes a boring mass of one colour. Those who are interested, this is an Escoda brush. I use Escoda brushes quite a lot. Just putting in the flesh tone for the elderly lady struggling up the hill with a bag. These are quite dark flesh tones, but they will dry a little bit lighter. But she is a native of Spain, so she will have darker skin. Just adding the shadows of the roller shutter. Nothing too precise. Trying to keep this painting loose. Sometimes I paint in quite a tight style where I'm trying to be very accurate, especially when I'm painting animals. But for scenes like this, it's nice to be able to relax and do a looser style. Just putting in the blue of a dress. Just putting in shadow of her skin there. As I say, on the dress I've left the white where the light's hitting it. The blue almost disappears into white. Blue shopping bag. When you're painting figures moving, just do one leg shorter than the other and it just creates movement straight away. It's a little bit of Naples yellow for her hat, bit of shadow on the side. Just putting a little bit of the shadow detail for the steps of the walkway. Disappear into the distance. Just dragging a brush, almost a dry brush technique, across the steps of the road. Even though it's supposed to be a road, it's more of a track, and it is stepped in a sort of a cobbled way. I've got a number 0 rigger brush here, using Neat's Payne's Grey for the bars on the security grille on the window. Don't need to be too careful, it's just a suggestion. It's got decorative twirls on the ends. It's just an indication of what's there, really. As in all Spanish villages, there's wires and all sorts stretching across from one building to another. So put that in. Bit of ironwork on the balcony under that roller shutter. Again, don't need to be too specific with the detail, it's just a suggestion of what's there. A few more final touches and I think we'll be done. I hope this conveys the bright sunny day in Altea. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you found some of this useful, and please subscribe and hit the bell for any notifications of future videos. And please give it a like. Thanks again for watching.